On March 2nd, 2024, a small group of bird watchers were walking on the frozen surface of Straits Pond in the George H. Montgomery Migratory Bird Sanctuary, an hour south of Montreal. That day, they witnessed something very special. A pair of bald eagles were soaring above the pond, then landing together in a large white pine tree. On March 3rd, my wife Phyllis and I visited the location after hearing about the birds' interest in this tree. We saw a bald eagle sitting in the middle of a large nest the size of a truck's tire. This showed us that she was probably incubating eggs or close to laying eggs. It was a surreal sight, with this being the first eagle nest seen in this region in many, many decades. From that day on and right into autumn, we visited the nest and other important areas of the eagle territory, such as Missisquoi Bay, while taking photos and video to document the growth of the family. We visited the nest again on March 27th, and judging by the adults' behavior on the nest, it appeared that they were feeding very young chicks, which, due to the height of the large pine tree, we couldn't see exactly what was occurring inside the nest from our low ground level view. On April 1st and 2nd, there was increased activity. The female was sitting on the edge of the nest for short spells rather than in the center of the nest, and the male was flying nearby and landing in a neighboring pine tree. On April 19th, we saw a young chick covered in a thick coat of down, popping its head up above the nest and occasionally flapping its wings. It looked very strong and alert. The chick looks to be about 3 weeks old or a little older. On April 22nd, we see two chicks. One is a fair amount larger than the other, but both are able to look about over the edge of the nest as though keeping an eye out for the adults bringing in food. They are also able to hobble about the nest area. On April 23rd, the female is seen landing at the nest edge, then flying off again, only to return to feed the chicks. Every day the chicks were getting visibly larger and being left for extended periods. Their down coat is dark, gray, and very thick. You can also see their dark adult pin feathers starting to push above their gray down. This would make the chicks 4 weeks old, or born during the last week of March. On April 24th, activities around the nest are certainly picking up. A 3-year-old subadult eagle is seen as it flies over and past the nest without incident. One juvenile toys with a large stick in the nest as the other flaps its wings vigorously. The adult female then flies in with a small bass and feeds both chicks equal shares of the fish. Oh, that's beautiful. There's both the babies up there flapping away. And the one in the foreground has been altering the sticks in the nest, moving the sticks around, doing a little house cleaning, I guess, out of boredom and stuff. But it's great to see both chicks up there flapping away. I'm as happy as can be. Now, she looks like she's preparing some food for the chick, which is usually the way it happens. They don't let the chick jump all over the food they bring in. They the adult picks pieces off and feeds to the chicks. After they get older, she'll basically drop the food off and they'll eat it themselves without her having to prepare it. But sometimes there's things like catfish, for example, have these poisonous spines off the pectoral fins, and if the chicks rush in and grab at it, it could get jabbed by this and it could cause an infection. Here you can see the young female actually walking about the nest. On April 25th, both chicks appear healthy and vibrant. The female feeds both of them, then relaxes on a branch just above the nest while the chicks rest and shuffle about the nest. It's just another day at the Eagle Nursery. Oh, there she comes. May 4th. The chicks are starting to look like eagles now, standing upright and showing the growth of adult feathers, replacing the gray thermal down.
That's the adult. How the other one's flapping.
Wow. May 6th. This film is in reality a study of animal behavior aimed at better protecting a bird species from human disturbance. The photography and video are but tools I use to help get the idea of conservation and protection across to the viewer. May 9th. Here the young are looking very noble, with the size of their beaks being very dark and impressive. May 13th.
Okay, chicks are the same color as the nest.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, it's a sheep chain. Oh,
May 17th. The young are actively moving all about the nest, and as they flap their huge wings, you can see how advanced the adult feathers have grown in on their wings and bodies. Very impressive. May 18th. The chicks spend most of their time exercising their wings as the adults watch from nearby. On sunny or hot days, the chicks seek refuge from the heat in the shade of the nest, and as big as they are, they can be difficult to see in the shaded areas of the nest. The adults spend much of their downtime in the large pines along the east side of the ridge, or what we call the cliff. May 26th. May 27th. The adults only come to the nest infrequently, with the female taking care of most of the feeding and keeping an eye on the chicks. Meanwhile, the male does most of the hunting on Missisquoi Bay, a kilometer away, but is always nearby. May 29th. As the female flies over the nest area along the east ridge of the pond, she is harassed by a sharp-shinned hawk. This hawk has an active nest about 100 feet away from the eagle nest tree in a small pine. The sharpie is more of a forest hunter of small birds, while the eagle gets most of its prey in the form of fish from the open waters of Missisquoi Bay. A while after her tussle with the sharpie, she returns to the nest to make sure all is well with the juveniles. June 1st, the female seems rather edgy at the nest. June 2nd, a lazy day at the nest site. June 4th, the chicks preen as the female perches by the cliff section at the east side of the pond. Recording. I just saw a bird land on the shelf here. It might have been the phoebe, I don't know. June 6th. June 7th. The juveniles are still sticking to the nest, but any day now they will start hopping to neighboring branches. It rains down on the juveniles. June 9th. Well, sure enough, it looks like the juvenile female was the first to branch off, a falconer's term, leaving the nest and its security for other perches as seen here. One of the adults flies in with a catfish to feed the young ones. June 11th. Well, now both the juveniles have branched off from the nest, a big day in the life of these young eagles. The young female certainly seems to love her independence from the nest. June 12th. Young bald eagles can sometimes be very aggressive to each other, with the firstborn getting the majority of the food and even pecking at and injuring its younger sibling. But in this case, there was little showing of that aggressiveness by the larger female juvenile. This may have been due to a bountiful and close supply of fish. June 14th. This is another big day as the juvenile female flies away from the nest for its inaugural flight. then returns to the nest as the adult female appears at the nest with the plucked body of a red squirrel. The juvenile female eats most of the meal as the juvenile male watches unconcerned from its perch just above the nest. With this first flight away from the nest by the juvenile female, we rejoice on this special day. But it will be another 2 months before it reaches true independence and can survive on its own. You can hear the juvenile male's high-pitched whining begging call as the female lands by the nest. June 15th. Both juveniles perch by the nest as a red-shouldered hawk flies overhead. Taking a break, Phyllis and I return to our cottage on the shores of Missisquoi Bay to see the adult and the juvenile female eagle flying together in front of our home over Missisquoi Bay. A first at seeing the juvenile on the bay and a good kilometer from the nest tree, and another big step for this fledgling bird. Later in the day at the nest, we see an oriole harassing the female eagle as it sits in a small pine tree next to the nest tree. Truly an unusual thing to witness this David and Goliath scene.
Just behind. Oh, change direction.
Yeah, it might be ready to fly off.
Oh, yes.
That's right. June 16th, as the female eagle takes a break and rests on a hemlock tree at the east ridge above what we will call the cliff, for reference reasons, an osprey appears over the ridge and starts to attack the eagle. The female ducks down and shifts position every time the osprey attacks. This is unusual to witness and not often seen here, perhaps due to a lot of easily caught fish in Missisquoi Bay nearby. An inquisitive redstart always serenades us when we visit the nest area. The juveniles hang out at the nest together, flying and hopping about the branches of the nest tree. They get along very well together, but the coming weeks will definitely challenge their quest for survival. June 17th, the juvenile female sits in a large pine tree above the cliff area, while the juvenile male perches in the nest tree. This area will become the center of the young eagle's universe for the next couple of weeks, where they will learn the basics of hunting and flight from the female adult. With the cliff about 90 yards north of the nest tree, they will watch the female hunt the pond, its waters and bulrushes. It'll be their hunting school and close neighborhood, along with visits to the big waters of Missisquoi Bay a kilometer west and over Highway 133, where you can hear the hum of the traffic as it meets the Quebec-Vermont borders a kilometer south of the nest. You can also hear that hum of the traffic on much of my video recordings. These photos show the juvenile female flying over the pond while watching the activities of the adult female as she hunts the pond. The juvenile male watches from the nest tree. June 18th, another special day. The adult female is seen on a log, right on the surface of the pond, with its feet in the water by the edge of the reeds below the cliff. Then I see the juvenile male in the small pine tree by the nest tree. This would make this the first flight away from the nest tree by the juvenile male. The juvenile female was the first to hatch, followed a few days later by the young male. So the timing is right on for the first flights of both juveniles. June 19th. The adult female and juvenile female are seen sitting together on a branch we call the wishbone, just above the water line by the cliffs. Both make a number of short, low flights over the pond as the young male watches from the pine tree. Now these details can become a little confusing, but I hope the video can help clarify what is occurring. Anyway, so he's just sitting up in the tree there, and she's sitting in her tree trying to. So there's three of them here. June 20th. The juvenile female and adult female perch in different trees over the cliff. Both look very wet from today's rain showers. A short time later, I see both adults perched in a dead elm tree at the west edge of the pond. The female then lands at the nest and flies off with a chunk of prey in her beak, while the juvenile male watches her beside the nest. Then I see her land by the adult male again in the dead elm tree. It's been a very wet day. Oh, isn't that nice? The other adult just landed, and they're both in the rain now, sitting there. She might have just been removing it, as part of the cleanup duty on the nest. June 21st. Both juveniles and the adult female perch at the nest looking just fine. The female flies off and lands above the cliffs. June 22nd. Both juveniles perch one above each other at the nest tree. The adult female perches at the elm tree. June 23rd. The juvenile male perches in the small pine tree beside the nest tree, eating the remains of a fish, as the female perches just below him. June 24th. The adult and juvenile female are perched on the wishbone at the cliffs. juveniles are now at the nest as the female arrives with food. The juveniles mob the nest and food as the female takes off in the squabble. The female is looking a bit ratty in the wings and tail, and looks like she is beginning to molt. The juvenile female then flies over the pond with the female. Meanwhile, the juvenile male flies over the east ridge above the cliff. He tries to land in the maple trees below the nest tree, but loses his footing and tumbles through the trees, possibly to the ground. Very dense coverage, and I can't see what's going on. He is very vulnerable if on the ground and can't get back up. But I see him 10 minutes later beside the nest. Both juveniles are at the nest tree. Later that day, I see the unidentified 3-year-old juvenile flying over Missisquoi Bay. Today was a very active day at the pond with some real nail-biting activity and a lot of flying by both the young eagles. As you can see here, she tries to land on the wishbone but loses her footing. Bad landings and takeoffs can get you into some real trouble if you're a young eagle learning how to fly. As she attempts to fly off the wishbone, her right leg gets jammed in the V of a branch and she is hung up for a moment. Later that day, I noticed a large scratch on her right leg from the hang-up, but she appears to be okay. When I studied peregrine falcons in the mid-80s in Montreal's downtown core, when they nested on a skyscraper, I saw one of those fledglings get hung up on a window seam of that building. The young peregrine hung there snagged for 30 seconds, though eventually unhooked itself. So I have seen this kind of scary moment before, only in the city jungle. It was the juvenile female eating at the nest, not an adult. And the juvenile male is right above her head in a branch. June 25th. There are no chicks at the nest, but the females at the nest. The juvenile male is now at the nest tree and flying about as though looking for the adult. Later that day, I see the juvenile male at Case Point in a hemlock tree. This is the first time I've seen him on the lake. So this is a special day for the young male. Then she took off went down to the cliff, and then I noticed 5 minutes later the two juveniles lower down in the nesting pine. June 26th. Both juveniles and the adult male are at the nest. He may have brought in some food as both the juveniles are picking at prey in the nest. She's moving. Okay, they just switched.
Yeah.
She's going off. Oh, she's actually feeding it now.
That's what I wondered.
Yeah, looking. She's right.
I think the adult's just eating herself.
Yeah, she eats last. Otherwise she'd get harassed by those birds.
Yeah, and the other one is still just eating himself.
Yeah. June 27th. The juvenile male and adult female fly in synchronized form over the pond. The female arrives at the nest with a fresh fish and drops it off for the juvenile male, who is alone at the nest. Later in the day, I see the juvenile female at Case Point on the bay. She drops her legs as she grabs something off the surface of the bay, perhaps a small fish. This is the first time I've seen a juvie actually attempt to grab something off the bay or the pond. Another giant step for the juvenile female. June 28th. The adult female perches on a hemlock tree at the pond as the juvenile male flies over the nest tree. He then tries to land in a pine tree near the nest tree and misses his footing and tumbles down through the tree but regains his footing. Moments later, he is sitting in the nest tree with his juvenile female sibling and all is good. Later that day, we're at the cottage making some lunch. I look out the kitchen window facing Missisquoi Bay. Looking out, I see the juvenile female perched on a branch of a large silver maple in our neighbor's yard. It is as though it followed us home. Now about 100 feet away from our residence, our waterfront view has now become the juvenile female's new turf, so to speak. There will be some long days for Phyllis and I to come, but it couldn't be any better a development. June 29th. The juvenile female perches in a tree overlooking the cliff and pond, as the juvenile male rides the high winds on a branch of the nest tree. Anyway, so the female took, half an hour after I got here, the female left those small pine trees and flew to just above the cliff area, looking out over the lake. Hung around for 50. June 30th. Today was an interesting day in the skies above Missisquoi Bay, just off of our beachfront. The juvenile male made its first appearance over the bay, being joined by its sibling and the adult female. Both juveniles talon grappled and chased each other in a game of attack and repel. Even the adult female got into the spirit of the day, chasing and grappling with the juveniles. There was a sense of exuberance to the whole affair. Most of the action took place about a football field distance or 50 to 100 yards south along the shore by Case Point. July 1st. An osprey flies over Missisquoi Bay carrying a taunch. A taunch is an invasive non-native fish which over the past 15 years has invaded various regions of Missisquoi Bay and Lake Champlain. Then a resident turkey vulture that I have named bat vulture, which has no tail, flies overhead. The juvenile female rests on the shore at Case Point after sunset. July 2nd. The juvenile male flies over the pond, then rests in the nest tree before taking more flights. July 3rd. The juvenile female perches on a hemlock branch barely 50 meters from our cottage. You can see our cottage and beach in the background. I took these photos while out in my small boat. Then I see the juvenile male flying over Missisquoi Bay by the cottage. July 4th. I see an adult and a juvenile male on a cedar tree at the cliff. This is the first time I have seen the juvenile male in this location, but may have overlooked it as a juvenile female in past observations. There is an osprey nest on one of the two cell towers you can see in the background. These are the birds that we see hunting with the eagles. July 5th. Green herons land on the Missisquoi Bay shoreline as the juvenile female rests at Case Point. The female adult flies below her. Blue-green algae forms on the bay, a threat to both eagle feeding behavior and lake recreation. July 6th. The juvie male and juvie female fly over the pond's east ridge. Then the juvie female flies over the ridge while the juvie male watches her from a tree perch below. Later in the day, the juvenile female perches at Case Point. Then, as the sun sets, she skims with her feet hanging down over Missisquoi Bay, leaving a trail of white water.
Busiest guys in the world, and I'm not complaining as a busy
an eagle.
musician.
Playing water skiing. Like water skiing.
Yeah.
How has it changed over the years?
July 7th. The juvenile female takes off from her perch along the bay's shoreline ridge. You can see the fine dark bar at the base of her tail, whereas the juvenile male's bar extends further up the tail area. In Canadian Indigenous cultures, bald eagles are seen as sacred symbols of courage, honor, and wisdom. Their feathers are used in ceremonies and traditional practices and are considered the carriers of prayers and messages to the Creator. The juvenile male and juvenile female attack and counterattack each other over the bay. This kind of behavior is familiar to viewers who have owned young kittens or puppies, who as youngsters go through the same youthful games of chase to perfect their hunting and survival skills. They continue flying together as dusk settles in over Missisquoi Bay near Case Point. July 8th. An osprey perched on the shoreline flies over to the Case Point area as a juvenile eagle flies near the same vicinity of the bay. July 9th. An osprey takes a break on the beachfront by the cottage as a turkey vulture looks for dead fish. The osprey calls out, then flies off. July 10th. It is a very rainy day with heavy showers as the juveniles hang out at the pond. Both are completely drenched as it pours down. July 12th. The juvenile male flies off its perch in a nest tree and is joined by its sibling female, flying over the pond. I see the adult female perched in a tree by the cliff. It flies off, low over the pond, hunting its waters. The juveniles are flying over the pond again, doing some talon grappling. Both juveniles land in the nest tree and start screaming calls as they shift about the nest tree, looking very agitated and probably hungry, while seeing the female hunting over the waters of the pond. The male flew over and has landed in the tree to the right of the female. You can just see her tail move, bit of movement. So that's the male on the right, and they're just above the nest. So maybe they know something I don't. But the adult then lands on the nest, bringing in a fish she just caught. The young male jumps down to the nest and flies off with the entire fish, along with a stick from the nest. He drops the stick as he flies off, but I fear he may have also dropped the fish, because a minute later he returns to the nest without the fish. July 13th. The juvenile female flies over the bay on this fine day. Then she flies low over the water with her legs and entire body submerging as she attempts to catch a fish, but was unsuccessful. July 14th. Both juveniles perch in the nest tree. July 16th. The female hunts over the pond, while both juveniles fly about the area of the nest tree. She then lands at the nest as both juveniles get aggressive and noisy. but I am not sure if she brought in any food. The female then flies off amongst the agitated young ones. They appear quite hungry. An interesting note is that bald eagles are the third largest bird of prey in North America, with a wingspan of 6 to 7 feet. Golden eagles are second in size, with a wingspan of 7 feet 3 inches, and the California condor is the largest bird of prey, with a wingspan of a whopping 9.5 feet. It is one of the largest birds of prey in the world. The Andean condor is the largest bird of prey in the world, with a wingspan of approximately 10 feet 10 inches. Bald eagles typically eat half to a pound of food per day. However, they have an expandable part of their esophagus called a crop, where they can store up to 2 pounds of food, allowing them to go without food for several days while digesting the food in the crop. But one might not think so, seeing how ravenous they can get. July 18th. The adult female and juvenile male fly over the pond. Then I decide to go to the cottage to get some lunch. I look out the kitchen window of the cottage to see something unusual happening about 80 meters along the shore. I grab my camera and rush down to the shoreline. I see the juvenile female flapping in the rough water trying to swim to shore. The waves are smashing into her, and at times I can hardly see her between the troughs of the waves. She is about 10 meters from shore, and as she gets closer to shore, the waves are curling harder. She was getting pounded right in front of my eyes. Researchers say that only 50% of young eagles survive their first year, and 25% of those survivors do not live to reach sexual maturity at 5 years. So that means up to 80% of young eagles die before they reach adulthood. But for those who do survive, they can live in the wilds for up to 25 years, reproducing offspring each year, with 50 chicks being born over their lifetime. Miraculously, she reaches shore and drags a large fish onto the shoreline with her. She pauses a minute, then starts feeding on the fish, which I can't see from where I stand. It was a dead fish she had scavenged from the water surface, a type of invasive Asian carp. I had never seen anything like this before, but it showed the determination and the extent to what a young eagle will go to survive. July 21st, the adult female flies over the lake. Then I see the juvenile male flying over the lake. An osprey shows up. July 22nd, I decide to go out for a boat ride. The juvenile male perches in a tree close to the cottage. He looks very fine. There are 3 adults in this photo at the Pines, about half a kilometer south from the cottage in Philipsburg and a kilometer from the US-Quebec borders. One tree has who I believe to be the adult male and an unidentified female in the same tree. The tree on the far right side of the pines shows the adult female. These pines always seem to have an eagle or eagles in them. July 23rd. Both adult eagles fly together at Case Point. Then the female flies over the bay. She is going through her molt, and it can take several months, but not all feathers are replaced every year. July 24th. The adult female perches in preens in a tree at the west side of the pond, while the juvenile male perches in a small pine beside the nest tree. Later in the afternoon, the juvenile male flies over Missisquoi Bay. August 5th. The female rests in the elm tree by the pond, as the juvenile male flies over the pond, then perches in a nest tree. The eagle nest has been battered and is falling apart. August 9th. An adult osprey is soaked as it sits in a cedar tree close to the cottage, while a juvenile osprey perches on a light stand for a baseball diamond in the nearby town of Bedford. August 11th. The adult female perches in a large pine tree just 100 meters across the Vermont-U.S. border. To the bald eagle, there are no borders. Phyllis and I followed the post-breeding behavior of this pair of eagles through the winter of 2025. We found that the adults both stayed in the vicinity of Philipsburg right through the winter and into the spring of 2025, when they rebuilt the nest and laid 2 eggs in the same white pine tree in late March. 2 eaglets hatched and are now reaching the most critical period of their lives, when they grow in their flight feathers and ready for their first flights, which should happen by approximately mid-June. If these young eagles continue to be disturbed at this time, they could be scared into premature flight, greatly lessening their chances of survival. So it is critical that any disturbances have to be prevented, or we risk the chance that they will not survive. For the love of eagles, Robert J. Galbraith, Philipsburg, Quebec, May 2025.